All right. So, first things first, as far as evaluating scholarly sources go, you will do the work on three of those sources for Journal 5.1, and then that is it. You will not actually end up transferring that information into your research log 2. It will not be in research log 3. At this point, we assume that you will know how to evaluate sources and only choose credible sources. Um, in fact, to be honest with you, pretty much from like this point forward, I don't think I ever had to state why a source was credible because it was always assumed that you would just use credible sources. And if anything feels fishy or sounds off or anything else like that, you don't use it. So that is at this point of your college career kind of the expectation of the level of research that you're going to do. So last thing, for kind of your training, whatever, your teaching, your instruction on evaluating sources, is to go through and realize that you are always evaluating two things. You are always evaluating kind of that authorship and publication alongside the content. I'll be honest, it doesn't matter if the Pope goes through and puts forth something. That is not enough to say it is credible. It is not enough to say that so and so has their PhD, therefore it's trustworthy. Not necessarily. People with PhDs put out some really weird stuff sometimes. Um, and a lot of theories go out. Maybe that's how I should put it. A lot of people with PhDs put out a lot of theories. So we need to go through and be able to evaluate things as credible through not only the authorship. We have to be able to look at that content. So the reading that is listed in the calendar for Monday, February 12th, you can go through and look at. There is kind of in the earlier sections some bullet pointed suggestions on how to evaluate out the authorship and whether the site and the author is credible. And then there's another list on the content. What I want and what you need to be doing for all of your sources from here on out is to use both of those to have items, pretty much split, right? 50-50 on, two, three reasons why the author and the site is credible, and two, three reasons why the content is credible. So when you go through and start to take a look at those, um, right, if we bring up the evaluating the source, right, we're talking about the author's credentials. So things like their work history, their work experience, their life experience, their educational experience. All of those things work. But in along with that, take a look of, does their PhD actually match what the subject that they're writing about is? Right? I have my PhD, but if I start putting stuff out about physics, nobody's going to trust that, right? And they shouldn't. I am not trained in physics. So check and make sure that they match. Check and see if they have published multiple times on this topic. Or is this the first thing they're writing about this topic? That might show something that's a little problematic. Um, so check those things when you look at the author. Check the date, right? Make sure that it is within kind of in that general guideline of 5 years. Um, If it's a book or something like that, check the edition of the book. Did it go through and has it been revised since it first came out? This is a good thing. Revision means that somebody is still committed to that information, and that and that they're also going through and spending the time to update it to make sure that it is the most current information, that there are no omissions, things like that. Um, we can, of course, look at the publisher and search that publisher through those lateral reading things where we start to look at, um, do we is there any inherent bias, right? Has the publisher been in business for a long time? Has that site or the source been there? Same thing with the title of the journal. How long has that journal actually been in publication? If it's super new, then they might be reaching for various articles. Whereas if it's super old, they might be, like dedicated to like one specific thing, but also more established and able to kind of pick and choose and judge, etc. Um, make sure that the level of journal is the level of research that you want to do. If this is a trade journal, then that's fine. Make sure that it is adequately written to people in that trade and doing that trade. If it's not, then you have a mismatch between the actual source and the audience, which can indicate poor authorship. All right, moving into content, right? Make sure that the intended audience matches your intended audience, or at least that it's written to the intended audience that you would be able to use, right? Make sure it's not too advanced, it's not too jargony, but also that it's not just to a general audience. Most of you in your research logs ones have commented that, just all of these non-scholarly like barely scratch the surface. Or it's like really good general information, but it doesn't really answer the question. And in that case, go through and find those other intended audiences where it will really start to go in depth and start to answer those questions. Um, Objectivity, obviously, everybody has bias and everybody writes with bias, but is the information generally based on fact, right? Or are they presenting opinion as fact? That can be problematic. Um, do they go through and do they cite things really well? Or do they have facts in there and then they don't provide a citation for it at all? Because maybe they don't have a citation for it, right? This is problematic content-wise. Is it well researched? When you go down and you look at the references, are all of those also from scholarly journals or scholarly reports or research or studies? Sorry. And along with that, do they actually like forget to mention whatever other sides there are, right? Or do they actually give space for those other sides and they're honest about those other sides? This would be a good thing about content. Right? Does the coverage, right? Is it adequately in depth for what you're needed for? Does it provide that balance perspective? Does it have enough viewpoints but still a purpose of their own? And then the writing style. I know this honestly always sounds like an easy one, but it's my favorite one to go through and critique. Is it organized logically? When they go through and set forth their argument, can you follow it? Are the main points like there and highlighted and actually presented in a way that you can find them? And then is it actually backed up with some sort of evidence and analyzed? Is it easy to read, or did you fall asleep? Right? Now, granted, sometimes scholarly journals, you're going to fall asleep, but did you go through and find that they just keep saying the same thing over and over again? And you're like, why is this 40 pages? Like, you could have had this done in 4. If that's the case, then their writing style is off. And their writing style indicates that there is something wrong with the content. Either they haven't thought in depth enough about it, or they don't have enough evidence to back it up. And in that case, maybe we shouldn't be using this content. So from here on out, go through and take a look at everything that you do with 2 things in mind. How much is the authorship credible? How much is the content credible? And just be aware that you are responsible, and you will be kept responsible from here on out for always using credible sources in all of your research according to the author and according to the content.